everyone, Joshua Hanlon here at BrickFair Alabama 2020, and today we've got a massive, incredible representation of a Civil War battle here for you today. And so we've got both of the builders who worked on this collaboration. If you guys want to introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive on in.
I'm Bob Sharp from Helena, just south of Birmingham, Alabama. This is my son, Boston.
Okay.
Yep, so I'm Boston. We've been doing this since I was about 5. He's been collecting since '84. We've been doing battles not near this size, but about different Civil War battles, Revolutionary battles since I can remember.
This is fantastic. So give us an overview of what this battle represents.
All right, this is the Battle of Fredericksburg from December 1862. We chose this battle. It's one of our favorites from the movie Gods and Generals, but also because of the distinctive geographic features. Everything's identifiable. And there's a good flow to it, you know, with the Union advance toward the Confederate defenses. We have a map from an American Heritage book that I grew up with, and then we have scenes from the movie Gods and Generals throughout the town and on the battlefield, so we combined the two. So we've got history with a little bit of the movie version.
Yeah, and it creates a great scene. Now, one thing that definitely catches your eye when you first walk up to this is all the minifigs. Do you know how many total minifigs there are on the build?
We have somewhere around 1,000 Union figures and over 300 Confederate figures at least. We didn't do a count because we were putting it together so quickly. And we incorporated as many minifigures as we could. In our collection, we have many more, but we thought this was a good representation of the battle.
So then if we start in the back here, to take us through this back section before we hit the river.
All right, so what this is Stafford Heights right here. The Union occupied this before they even crossed. This is the Rappahannock River. So what they did is they built a pontoon bridge. Yeah, so they built a pontoon bridge under fire from Confederate forces here in the town, and then ended up crossing it and taking over the town. And there were a few Confederate troops in the town. It was mainly Barksdale's Mississippians is what they were called. And all they were doing was they were holding the town long enough so that the Confederate troops could get set up on Maury's Heights over there at the end. And so after they moved into the town, it was actually kind of looted. So it's in the movie Gods and Generals, but I mean, it also really happened. So you can kind of see here in the middle all these different troops. I mean, there's broken furniture. There's a scene in the movie where they're playing the piano. There's also a famous scene where a slave stands in front of the house and tells the Union troops, "No, this is my house," so that they won't loot it, and she's protecting it for her owners.
Yeah, I love all the different scenes and kind of areas of life you were able to recreate here in the town.
Right. My son was the best at recreating the scenes just because they're so iconic from the movie, which is one of our favorites. Like he said, we have the broken furniture. You have them arresting Confederate troops, some of the ones, Barksdale's Mississippians and some Floridians who were in the town. So we tried to incorporate as much of that just to give people a sense of what actually happened in the battle as well.
And the design of the minifigs is very unique here as well. You've got a lot of different ones there, so talk about what those guys kind of represent.
The ones with red bandanas and red pants are Zouaves, which were primarily New York and Pennsylvania militia units that were in the battle. Some of the others, obviously these are the original LEGO cavalry, but if you see the black hats on the far side in the navy blue, those represent the Iron Brigade. The Iron Brigade of the West, which was primarily Wisconsin, Michigan troops. They actually were involved in another part of the battle, but we wanted to incorporate that unit here. And then some of the other units, most specifically, the last line of Union advance is the New York 69th, which was the Irish Brigade, and that firing on them is the Georgia 24th, which is Cobb's Irish Brigade from Georgia. So you have the Irish firing against the Irish. Again, a classic scene from the movie Gods and Generals, but some of them represent United States federal troops, and others are state militias that were involved in the campaign.
Yeah, fantastic. So as we come out of the town kind of here, talk about this section of the build, you've got some more like a stream going through there in that building?
This was a canal that ran diagonally across the battlefield, and that was part of what held up the Union advance. They had to cross 3 small bridges, which we've incorporated 2 here. They had to cross 3 small bridges and then line up into battle formation to charge the Confederates. So that canal, it was one of the main features of the battlefield, and it held up the Federal advance, which really led to the slaughter.
And so then we'll move to the far end now, and we can keep taking a closer look down there. And you mentioned some of what these troops represent, but you also notice a very large hill area here, so it slopes up.
This is a slope up to Maury's Heights, and about halfway up the height there was a sunken road with a stone wall, which is still on the battlefield there in Fredericksburg, Virginia. In fact, you can go on Google satellite images and still see that road. And there was a stone wall with a sunken road, so the Confederates had excellent defensive positions to just continually fire down on the Union troops as they advanced. Farther up onto Maury's Heights, we've got the Confederate artillery where they were stationed, and they also were able to just sweep the field of Union troops for the entire advance. From one end of the battlefield to the other in real life, this would be about 2 miles. And we've just tried to condense it down to get as many of the features and the flow of the battle as we could.
Do you know how long this build is in total?
It's just over 16 feet.
Okay, wow. Yeah, that's so impressive. So what was the ultimate culmination of the battle? How did it end?
It ended in a Confederate victory. There's another part of the battle, which of course can't be seen here. The Union advance almost broke through to the Union left flank, the Confederate right, but it was finally repulsed, and eventually Burnside realized that it was too great of a slaughter, and the Union troops retreated back across the Rappahannock River to fight again another day.
And as you guys were researching for this build, what was the historical research like? Because you've got not only all the Lego building time that has to go into it, but you also have to figure out what troops were involved and where everything was located and that sort of thing.
My degrees were in history, and originally I was a historian. Now I'm teaching special ed, but I have a vast library at home, and like I say, we also incorporated much of the movie, which was one of his favorite movies growing up. But we have so much of the research at home.
It's Gods and Generals is like our favorite Civil War movie. I can't tell you how many times we've watched it, because I was telling you earlier, we've never done a battle this big, but we've done several battles smaller in our own Lego room at home. And so every time we're doing Civil War, because there's so few movies made, we watch Gods and Generals at least one time. And so that's why a lot of that is incorporated. And the movie is actually very good in how it depicts and tells you the different units. That's how we know this is classic, famous Irish versus Irish scene, because it talks, because this side's talking about they're fighting for their independence again, like they did in against Britain, and these guys are just fighting for what they believe is the true freedom. And so it's just this classic scene, and it's how we've seen it so many times that we can, as we watch it, we recall lines as they're said. And so I think that movie also did a great job for us in helping us really depict this scene.
This is such a massive layout here. How did this build come together for you guys as far as kind of that collaborative process, and as you were working on it together, how does that work?
So we started on New Year's Eve of this year, actually, because I was supposed to get an internship, but or I did get an internship, and it started later than we thought, so we were able to come here. So we drew out on a pad, we had a notepad, and we just drew a big rectangle of what we knew we wanted it to look like, and divided that into 32 by 32 squares and 64 by 64 48 by 48 gray plates. And as you can see, kind of the bases are all right here are 32 by 32 plates with pins in the bottom. And so we knew we needed, that's why we drew on the notepad, was how many base plates we would need underneath. And then the hill is actually in gray base plates. It's 3 across. And so we did those in sections of 1 by 3 gray base plates. And so we knew how to make the base, and we started with the hill and kind of each end and worked inwards. So that way it was easier to know exactly how much slope we would need.
You guys mentioned you've got close to almost maybe 1,500 minifigures in the build here. So is this something you've been collecting for many, many years to get that many?
When Lego first came out with the cavalry and Indian sets, I fell in love with those, just with my love of history. And with them having, blue troops from that time, roughly that time period, I started collecting every blue and gray figure that Lego would ever come out with. And I've just been doing that for probably 20 years, collecting blue and gray figures. And, of course, BrickLink helps with ordering. But, yeah, I've been collecting the figures for at least 20 years.
And I know we mentioned some of the different scenes and kind of vignettes you were able to include in the city, but are there any other parts of the battle that were like little minifigs or scenes you wanted to recreate that you wanted to point out here?
So, actually, they didn't. So in the movie, because they couldn't film across the actual canal where Fredericksburg happened, they show a little stream and they cross it on wooden planks. And so, as my dad said earlier, there were 3 bridges that they crossed. So we included that as kind of an honor to the movie of them kind of crossing that little stream, even though that didn't necessarily take place in the actual battle. The other thing is, in the movie, there is a famous scene where Joshua Chamberlain's commander is telling him about Union troops converting from column of 4s into a line of battle. And it talks about how they would do, if they were called to make this move, they'll do it under fire. And so that is what that scene represents right here. As you can see, it's a column of 4s forming into a line of battle underneath this hail of Confederate cannon fire. And it's about how they repetitioned it so many times so that they could do it without even thinking.
It's great that you were able to capture so much of that in there. Are the minifigure parts all original Lego pieces, or is there anything custom in there?
So most, if not almost all, are going to be normal Lego pieces. The only thing that's going to be custom primarily are a couple of the beards for the generals and the bayonets from Brickforge, as well as some of the, there are some muskets that we also bought. Now, the tops underneath are all going to be normal Lego pieces. However, as you can kind of see, they've all got these Civil War era shirts, and that's because we took decals. My dad would print them off from Brickshelf. People would put pictures on there of what these uniforms would look like converted into a minifigure scale top, and we'd print them out on our color printer, cut them out, and glue them to the top to give them that really Civil War era feel, so that's not just random blue tops.
No, and it makes the minifigs look great. So when you guys bring this to a show, then what's that setup process like for this whole build?
Well, we had it in sections. We brought it in. We got all of the sections put together, and then we had to put most of the top layer on once we got here for the center sections. Like I say, the hills were pretty much done, but it was just finishing up, getting that top layer, above all of the base that we had built up. And then after that, it's how do we want to position the minifigures, and put in little scenes like, where comrades are helping one another back from the front line who've been injured. You've got medics back toward the town that are trying to treat some of the injured. Houses being blown up, doing little details like that. We finished that once we got here because that would not have transported well. But that's the main thing. And then organizing how the units would have come into the battle.
This is so great. What type of reaction do you get from the public as they come up and see, a big Civil War battlefield laid out like this?
With it being so long ago, and history is not one of the favorite subjects of so many children, but they can see that you can combine something fascinating from history with the great product that Lego is. And so, they see history in a new light, which is what I love as a historian. But also they see, hey, there's so much more that we can do with our Lego.
Yeah. That's great. So you can kind of get people inspired a little bit to maybe learn more about these topics.
Right. Because my son, who is becoming an engineer, with Lego you can incorporate, the historical aspect, the geographical aspect, but also the physics, the mathematics, the engineering, and it all works together in so many different disciplines, and you're still having fun doing it.
For sure. Well, thank you so much, guys. I love this whole layout. I love to see these big battles depicted with all the minifigs and everything. So great work. I think it turned out awesome. Thank you so much.
So much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.